Hello everyone, welcome to the 225 Literary and Jury Charge. I'm going to start off with a narrative answer, and this will be at 225. Ready? I am basing most of my arson report on the remaining material. The roof was completely burned in this area. The rafters of the ceiling remained, and I used the burn patterns in finding the point of origin. The heaviest burn patterns will be close to the area where the fire started. Then the burn pattern will diminish as it goes out from there. By the time I got there, the ceiling had a hole cut in it where the fire department had gone in and removed part of the roof. Now I'm going to read this one more time at 250, okay, just because it's a little bit more basic as far as the vocabulary goes. Ready? I am basing most of my arson report on the remaining material. The roof was completely burned in this area. The rafters of the ceiling remained, and I used the burn patterns in finding the point of origin. The heaviest burn patterns will be close to the area where the fire started. Then the burn pattern will diminish as it goes out from there. By the time I got there, the ceiling had a hole cut in it where the fire department had gone in and removed part of the roof. All right. I have some real classified ads, and I will read this at 200. Okay. All right, and these are real classified ads, kind of a blooper type of thing. Ready? It's summertime. Bring your kids to the Garma Specialty Clinic for circumcision. Toyota Scion coffin with 52-inch sunroof, $21,800. For sale, collection of old people. Help wanted, dental hygienist 2 days a week. Will marry if necessary. Wanted, someone who can speak and write Australian. Bass player, not the greatest but doesn't suck either. Looking to play with classic rock band. Childcare provider, apply in person at Jack and Kill Childcare. Mentally ill needed to interview for novel. Must be successful and interesting. Free to good country home, 3/4 Rottweiler, 1/4 Shepherd, 3-year-old, intelligent, loves to eat live rabbits and kittens. And then down at the bottom it says, in Japan, the drunk tank is called the tiger box. All right, moving into some jury charge. The subject is burden of proof. Okay, so your brief for that is either BURP or B final RP and leave out the U. Either one works. All right, I'm going to read this at 200. Okay, all right, here we go. The jury are instructed that if you find Michael Boone, the treasurer, had express authority to sign the notes and payments and effect the loan in question, or if you find that these acts were within the apparent scope of his authority or within the scope of the authority which he was accustomed to exercise without objection by these defendants, your verdict should be for the plaintiff. But if you find that borrowing this money in the way testified to and giving this paper was not within the authority expressly given to him or within the apparent scope of the authority which he was accustomed to exercise, then your verdict should be for the defendants. And if you should find that this money borrowed or received for the paper in suit was not for the use of the defendants, and the plaintiff knew or had good cause to know that fact, or if for any other reason the plaintiff did not in good faith trust the credit of the defendants, then your verdict should be for the defendants. You are instructed that to charge a corporation upon the act of an officer or agent, it must be shown directly or presumptively either that the act was performed while in the discharge of his ordinary duty in the usual course of business and within his scope, the general scope and apparent sphere of such duty, or that it was expressly authorized, or that it was performed with the knowledge and implied assent of the directors of the corporation or its authorized officer, or was subsequently ratified by them. In this case, the burden of proof rests upon the defendant. He admits receiving the money, and his defense in this case is that he has repaid the same. It therefore follows that the defendant must prove by the preponderance of the evidence that he has paid the indebtedness which he once owed. If you find from the preponderance of the evidence that the defendant has repaid to the plaintiff the $497,780 which he received from the payment in question, then your verdict will be for the defendant, no cause of action. But if on this question you find the evidence evenly balanced or preponderating in plaintiff's favor, then you will find a verdict in plaintiff's favor for the amount you find the defendant is owing on the amount of said payment. Under the evidence in this case, it appears that either of all said check has been paid or no part of it has been paid, so your verdict will be either for the amount of $49,770.80, a verdict of no cause of action. If you find the plaintiff is entitled to recover, then you will add interest at 20% from and after April 1st, 2008. If you find the debt has been paid, then your verdict will be a verdict of no cause of action. Right, I've got a section from Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. This is on lower your tolerance to stress. All right, here we go. Ready? It seems that we have it backward in our society. We tend to look up to people who are under a great deal of stress, who can handle loads of stress, and those who are under a great deal of pressure. When someone says, I've been working really hard, or I'm really stressed out, we are taught to admire, even emulate their behavior. In my work as a stress consultant, I hear the proud words, I have a very high tolerance to stress, almost every day. It probably won't come as a surprise that when the stressed out people first arrive at my office, more than often than not, what they are hoping for are strategies to raise their tolerance to stress even higher so they can handle even more. Fortunately, there is an inviolable law in our emotional environment that goes something like this. Our current level of stress will be exactly that of our tolerance of stress. You'll notice that the people who say, I can handle lots of stress, will always be under a great deal of it. So if you teach people to raise their tolerance to stress, that's exactly what will happen. They will accept even more confusion and responsibility until, again, their external level of stress matches that of their tolerance. Usually it takes a crisis of some kind to wake up a stressed out person to their own craziness. A spouse leaves, a health issue emerges, a serious addiction takes over their life, something happens that jolts them into a search for a new kind of strategy. It may seem, but if you were to enroll in the average stress management workshop, what you would probably learn is to raise your tolerance to stress. It seems that even stress consultants are stressed out. What you want to start doing is notice your stress early before it gets out of hand. When you feel your mind moving too quickly, it's time to back off and regain your bearings. When your schedule is getting out of hand, it's a signal that it's time to slow down and reevaluate what's important rather than power through everything on the list. When you're feeling out of control and resentful of all you have to do, rather than roll up your sleeves and get to it, a better strategy is to relax, take a few deep breaths, and go for a short walk. You'll find that when you catch yourself getting too stressed out early before it gets out of control, your stress will be like the proverbial snowball rolling down the hill. When it's small, it's manageable and easy to control. Once it gathers momentum, however, it's difficult, if not impossible, to stop. There's no need to worry that you won't get it all done. When your mind is clear and peaceful and your stress level is reduced, you'll be more effective and you'll have more fun. As you lower your tolerance to stress, you will find that you'll have far less stress to handle, as well as creative ideas for handling the stress that is left over. All right. I've got some material on proprietorship. All right, here we go. Ready? Let me give you a small word list. We've got small scale, debts, capital, American, entitled, proprietorship, carpenters, millers, smiths, wrights, scholar, clerks, plumbers, coopers, clerk. Here we go. A sole proprietorship is the name applied to a business that is owned and operated by a single person. The sole proprietorship is the oldest form of business organization, dating back to carpenters, millers, smiths, wrights, coopers, plumbers, and clerks, a clerk or scholar. The proprietor furnishes all of the capital for the business. He must assume all the risks and all the losses. He must pay all the debts and be responsible for all the decision making. The proprietor is entitled to receive all the profits of the business, and he also holds title to all of the business assets. A sole proprietorship is well suited to a small-scale business. In fact, the vast majority of American businesses are proprietorships. All right. We've got a technical answer. This is only about a paragraph long. And you're going to hear combustible, pyrolytic, deteriorate, charring, charcoal. Okay, I'm going to read this once at 180, again at 200, and then again at 225. Ready? When prolonged heating is aimed against something combustible, we call that pyrolytic action. Anything that will burn is combustible. Pyrolytic action begins to deteriorate that combustible material and cause charring. If it is wood, it will form a charcoal film. Over a long amount of time, the pyrolytic action will break down the tissue of that wood so that it will ignite at possibly as low as 100 degrees. Okay, now I'm going to read that at 200. When prolonged heating is aimed against something combustible, we call that pyrolytic action. Anything that will burn is combustible. Pyrolytic action begins to deteriorate that combustible material and cause charring. If it is wood, it will form a charcoal film. Over a long amount of time, the pyrolytic action will break down the tissue of that wood so that it will ignite at possibly as low as 100 degrees. All right, and then the last time will be at 225. Okay, let me just date this. All right, here we go. When prolonged heating is aimed against something combustible, we call that pyrolytic action. Anything that will burn is combustible. Pyrolytic action begins to deteriorate that combustible material and cause charring. If it is wood, it will form a charcoal film. Over a long amount of time, the pyrolytic action will break down the tissue of that wood so that it will ignite at possibly as low as 100 degrees. All right, and I think I'll read this one more time and read it at 250. Okay, here we go. When prolonged heating is aimed against something combustible, we call that pyrolytic action. Anything that will burn is combustible. Pyrolytic action begins to deteriorate that combustible material and cause charring. If it is wood, it will form a charcoal film. Over a long amount of time, the pyrolytic action will break down the tissue of that wood so that it will ignite as possibly as low as 100 degrees. Okay. We doing on time? All right, we've got some jury charge. Subject is evaluating testimony. All right, here we go. And I will read this. I think I will read this at 200. Okay. All right, here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, upon the issues here joined, the burden rests upon the plaintiff of proving all of the material allegations of the complaint by a fair preponderance of the evidence. By preponderance of evidence is meant the greater weight of the evidence, the greater force with which the evidence on one side or the other appeals to your minds. But if the party having the burden in this case has satisfied you of the truth of his or her contention in that regard, he or she has sustained such issue by a fair preponderance of the evidence. If the evidence is evenly balanced for and against any particular fact and issue, then your finding upon such fact should be against the party having the burden of proof in that regard, since he or she has failed to prove the same by a fair preponderance of the evidence. If you believe from the evidence that any witness has testified falsely, intending thereby to deceive or mislead you as to any material fact or facts in the case, then you have a right to disbelieve the testimony of such witness, except insofar as such testimony is corroborated by other credible testimony. This is a civil case, and you are the exclusive judges of the weight of the evidence and the credibility of the witnesses. In determining the weight you will give to the evidence of any witness, you will have a right to take into consideration the demeanor of such witness on the stand, his or her candor and sincerity in testifying, or the lack of the same, his or her interest or lack of interest in the outcome of the suit, his or her knowledge or lack of knowledge concerning the facts about which he or she has testified, his or her prejudice or bias, if any, is shown, his or her relationship, if any, to either party to the suit, and such other facts and circumstances disclosed by the evidence as will assist you in determining the weight you should give to the testimony or evidence in the case. Neither by these instructions nor by any words uttered or remark made by the court during this trial does or did the court intimate or mean to give or wish to be understood as giving an opinion as to what the proof is or what it is not, or what the facts are in this case or what are not the facts therein. It is solely and exclusively for the jury to find and determine the facts, and this they must do from the evidence. Having done so, they apply to them the law as stated in these instructions. The instructions to the jury are and constitute one connected body in series, and should be so regarded and treated by the jury. That is to say, they should apply them to the facts as a whole, and not detach or separate any one instruction from any of the others. An article here. This is on I can't accept not trying. I will read this at 200. Okay. All right, here we go. Ready? I visualized where I wanted to be, what kind of player I wanted to become. I knew exactly where I wanted to go, and I focused on getting there. Michael Jordan. I never looked at the consequences of missing a big shot. Why? Because when you think about the consequences, you always think of a negative result. Some people get frozen by that fear of failure. They get it from peers or from just thinking about the possibility of a negative result. They might be afraid of looking bad or being embarrassed. I realized that if I was going to achieve anything in life, I had to be aggressive. I had to get out there and go for it. I don't believe you can achieve anything by being passive. I'm not thinking about anything except what I'm trying to accomplish. Any fear is an illusion. You think something is standing in your way, but nothing is really there. What is there is an opportunity to do your best and gain some success. If it turns out my best isn't good enough, then at least I'll never be able to look back and say I was too afraid to try. Failure always made me try harder the next time. That's why my advice has always been to think positive and find fuel in any failure. Sometimes failure actually gets you closer to where you want to be. If I'm trying to fix a car, every time I try something that doesn't work, I'm getting closer to finding the answer. The greatest inventions in the world had hundreds of failures before the answers were found. I think fear sometimes comes from a lack of focus or concentration. If I had stood at the free throw line and thought about 10 million people watching me on the other side of the camera lens, I couldn't have made anything, so I mentally tried to put myself in a familiar place. I thought about all those times I shot free throws in practice and went through the same motion, the same technique that I had used thousands of times. You forget about the outcome. You know you are doing the right things, so you relax and perform. After that, you can't control anything anyway. It's out of your hands, so don't worry about it. On commitment, I approached practices the same way I approach games. You can't turn it on and off like a faucet. I couldn't dog it during practice and then when I needed that extra push late in the game, expect it to be there. But that's how a lot of people approach things, and that's why a lot of people fail. They sound like they're committed to being the best they can be. They say all the right things, make all the proper appearances, but when it comes right down to it, they're looking for reasons instead of answers. If you're trying to achieve, there will be roadblocks. I've had them. Everybody has had them. But obstacles don't have to stop you. If you run into a wall, don't turn around and give up. Figure out how to climb it, go through it, or work around it. Great advice there. All right. We have just about a minute left. I have some land description for you. Okay, here we go. Ready? All that portion of lot number 50, First Concession, Township of Yucaipa West, being a strip of land 150 feet in width and 75 feet measured perpendicularly from a center line, which center line may be located as follows, commencing at a point in the south limit of said lot 50, distant 1,225.53 feet, measured north 71 degrees, 35 minutes west along the south limit from the southeast angle of lot 50 aforesaid, thence north 32 degrees, 15 minutes west, 278.23 feet, thence north 33 degrees, 53 minutes west, 774.30 feet, thence north 34 degrees, 19 minutes west, 38.93 feet more or less to the north limit of said lot number 50. All right, and that concludes our literary jury charge for the 225 class.